Welcome to the show, and welcome to Glow So Bright. In today's episode, I'll be teaching you how to paint small arms using spray paint. And I can even teach you how to use stencils to have a camouflage pattern on your rifle. Now, full disclosure, just to get things out of the way, I do have personal relations with the owner and operator of Rattler Innovations, which I will feature the products over here. Yet, I paid for these with my own money. I did not receive any sort of special coupon codes or free product or anything like that, but I'm going to try it out and show it off. So, there are some reasons why you want to paint your firearm. One is that it reduces infrared signature, which is quite important if you're going to use night vision or be operating in situations where you expect your adversary to use night vision. Another thing that camouflaging will do to your rifle is to provide camouflage and reduce signature for daytime use under ordinary observation through daytime conditions. Another reason why you want to paint your firearms is they look cool. A properly painted firearm does look pretty awesome, and I'm going to try and do it in a Rhodesian Brushstroke in the recommended color scheme. And I find that Rhodesian Brushstroke to be a very cool camouflage and quite effective. So let me go talk about what you need to do to paint your rifle before I talk about why I chose Rhodesian Brushstroke. So what sort of materials do you need to spray paint your firearm? You're going to need your firearm, of course. You're going to need good painter's tape, some sort of degreaser or solvent, optionally some other materials to go and strip the existing paint on it. And you're going to need flat spray paint with a flat finish. In my experience of painting other things, the ultra flat stuff by Krylon seems to kind of orange peel and be kind of gross, or makes it difficult to add subsequent coats. But I find this flat stuff to be quite nice, and the recommended colors would be, for this particular camouflage pattern and paint scheme, would be Rust-Oleum Flat Sand, Magic Earth Brown, as well as Magic Olive Drab Green. However, do whatever you want. It's your firearm, you can paint it how you like it, just make sure it doesn't impede function. You're also going to need some hobby knives out there to trim the masking tape and have it cover important areas. So why did I choose Rhodesian Brushstroke as a camouflage choice to paint my gun? Well, I find that pattern itself is pretty cool, and that it's quite effective for my local area. There are plenty of yellows, there are plenty of browns, sand colors, and a little bit of vegetation here and there, which is perfect when matching with Rhodesian Brushstroke. Multicam is also a viable choice, but the problem though is that it's more complicated of a camouflage pattern to paint, requiring more layers and a gradient in a base coat. But with Rhodesian Brushstroke, I only need 3 colors of paint and 2 stencils, which is one of the more inexpensive offerings by Rattler Innovations. Another thing is that for historical purposes, it was a really neat experimental camouflage pattern that was considered for adoption in the United States Armed Forces. For example, for the United States Army and the Marine Corps to replace M81 Woodland for a more universal camouflage pattern, in the first experimental runs of testing by the US Army, a pattern heavily inspired by Rhodesian Brushstroke, Desert All Over Brush, was considered to be chosen for adoption in the United States Army, which was instead, all those millions of dollars in testing, was scrapped by a worse-performing camouflage pattern. Universal Camouflage Pattern, UCP, which is that gray, ugly digital pattern that doesn't work in anywhere except for gravel, rocks, the moon, or grandma's couch. Another thing is that in the United States Marine Corps testing and trials for a successor camouflage to M81 Woodland, the Rhodesian Brushstroke pattern was actually the number 3rd in effectiveness, right behind a digital tiger stripe pattern and behind the number 1 choice of Marpat, which is the chosen camouflage pattern to replace M81 Woodland for the Marine Corps and is still used to this day. So a neat little history fact. One thing I will do is disassemble, maintain, and clean the pistol. Make sure that there isn't any sort of dust and dirt on the outside, make sure the inside is well lubricated, and make sure the outside of the barrel is also clean, under the handguards. I wouldn't want to paint over neglect, dirt, or surface rust. That'd be a huge problem. Maintaining the firearm also doesn't hurt at all, and it should be done on a regular basis anyways. Over here at the barrel, this is why I need to remove the handguard as well. This is rusty, this needs to be cleaned up and be covered with a coat of oil. I will then go and clean the external surfaces of the firearm using solvent to make sure that paint and masking tape sticks to properly. Oil will cause problems with the adhesion of paint and tape. Next, I'll mask off the firearm according to guidelines under US Army PEO Soldier. I'll mask off any sort of markings, any sort of serial numbers, selector markings, moving parts, entryways or ports that would go into the interior of the firearm, any sort of screw holes or anything like that, mask off any sort of controls, mask off lenses, sighting systems, iron sights. Make sure that paint does not get to anywhere where paint does not need to be. Only on the outside of the firearm at any sort of non-moving parts or any sort of non-critical parts. Also, the barrel needs to be masked off. I will also insert a foam earplug into the muzzle of the firearm and then cover that with masking tape. For the interior of the firearm, I would stuff the upper receiver cavity full of paper towels and then close the dust cover. And then for between the upper and lower receiver, I will have a sheet of paper towel to shim and close off the gap in between to prevent tape from getting inside of the internals of the firearm. This is what the firearm should look like if masked off properly. All markings are masked off, optics are masked off, the barrel is fully masked off, and make sure any other moving parts or screw holes are masked off, same with any sort of T markings or anything like that. Now let's go paint. A magazine should be inserted into the firearm to go and seal off the mag well and keep paint from going through the internals through the bottom of the firearm. Next, we'll go apply our first coat of paint. I'm going to use Rust-Oleum flat sand and use light, even coats. Also, spray paint in a well-ventilated area, do it safely, and do it outdoors if possible. And if it's windy, it would be more difficult to apply the spray paint. After the exterior of the firearm has been painted with a base coat, I would let it set aside for a full week. Otherwise, the other layers on top would not stick to properly and would just leave paint everywhere and leave a sticky, plasticky, gross finish. After letting my first coat of paint dry for a week and cure, I'll go apply my other layers of paint. I'll be using Magic Earth Brown, and I'll be using the first stencil in the Rattler Edition stencils. The closer the stencil would be applied to the firearm, the better, and when the stencil is spread out further away, all these fine details would be lost. Especially in this sort of pattern as fine as Rhodesian camouflage pattern, and it's less forgiving than woodland, for example. So I'll make sure that I'll have a nice even coat of paint on top of the firearm and have it go from the left to the right side. And make sure that any other areas above or to the side of the stencil, each individual piece of the pattern will match with the other part of the pattern to give a nicer finish. If you feel like you messed up in painting the firearm, it's okay. You can go and touch up any sort of areas that you missed or improperly painted with the other coat of paint using the base coat color. From there you can try again. However, for the weird angles of the upper receiver, especially that of the forward assist and the brass deflector, it is more difficult for me to get the stencil much more close to the firearm part itself. After waiting a little bit and wait for my other coat of paint to dry, I'll then go and apply my green coat of paint above the brown coat of paint. And I'll do so by aligning the stencils of the second stencil on top of the first stencil very carefully, and then use a light coat of green paint so it'll have a slight green over brown, much like in the fabric camouflage pattern. Now that looks beautiful. Now before I use a paint job or peel off the masking tape just yet, I will wait another week. Okay, we have our final coat of our firearm fully dried after about 5 days, a week or so approximately. And I think it's a good time to now peel off all the masking tape. So some of it has already been falling off. Some of it kind of looks a bit uneven here and there, like due to the lubricant seeping through the trigger pin holes, but not a big deal. The main thing we have is to not make sure that paint interferes with the function of the firearm. Let's just peel off all the paint we have over here, put it to the side. Okay, with all the tape removed from the outside of the firearm, except for this over here with the serial number and everything, I'll just leave that on there for now. Let me go and remove the handguard so I can remove all the tape underneath it. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm gonna go lubricate the barrel, the outside of the barrel, and put on our handguard. Okay, let's go and lubricate the outside of the barrel and the gas block and the barrel nut. Probably got a little bit of paint down here, but otherwise, I think I did a pretty good job painting this. Now, let's go and slide our handguard above it. And we need to go time our handguard properly to the upper receiver, which means we need to go and remove our optic. Okay, let's have something to just keep this thing in place. The good old CQC optic mount. In all seriousness, this is just a Colt carry handle. Now let's go and put our rail together properly. Okay, now that's in place, let's go and put the 2 bolts back in place. And looking at the instructions for this particular rail, they recommend using 5 foot-pounds or about 60 inch-pounds. So we have our torque wrench set at 60 foot-pound, and let's put it back in. A little trick to make sure you know everything's in place is get a paint marker and there we go, we have made a witness mark. Let's go put our internal components back in. Here is what our firearm looks like when painted up. And I think this looks really cool. And sure, with all this black stuff here and there, eventually more black spots will be exposed when the firearm becomes used even more. And that sort of distressing on the camouflage paint job, I think would look even better as this gets more and more used. What's even more important is that it doesn't impede function at all. So let's do a little bit of a function check. So, magazine catch works fine. When the hammer is back, the safety selector can move unimpeded. Trigger works fine. It's smooth. And if a magazine is inserted and the charging handle is put all the way to the rear, bolt locks back and the bolt release works fine. So it does function normally as it should. Now, with me removing the optic and the handguard to index and reinstall the handguard properly, I will need to go and re-zero my sights as well as my optic, but not too much of a big deal. I'm switching between ammunition types anyways, so I may have a point of impact shift anyways. But otherwise, I'm quite happy with this. And with the right color of paint, and the right stencils, a little bit of creativity, and the right preparation to make sure you don't spray paint things that you shouldn't, go and give these Rattler Innovation stencils a try. I highly recommend them, and so far I'm quite pleased. One minor nitpick though is that with these particular colors on this particular example over here, using the recommended paint, for the faded Rhodesian uniforms out there, the ones that are like heavily worn out, which most of them you find nowadays are, or even back then in the 70s, they aren't as dark or as bold as, and it had this color is more similar to what I have over here. But colors here and there are difficult to take a look at, especially among old photographs and vintage worn out items. But for the lighter type of color scheme over here, for the areas that I'm in, it's pretty good. Now, if you do enjoy this video, go ahead, give it a like and a thumbs up. If not, dislike it. Go in the comment section and tell me what you think. Read the video description for more details on where to find these sorts of stencils that I used and the paints as well. Sure, some of them are an affiliate link through Amazon, just regular stuff, but as time of filming and publication, I don't have any sort of referral code or anything like that from Rattler. But otherwise, I'm quite pleased with this. But the best way to show support for the channel is to share and subscribe and engage. Informative content just like this needs to defeat the YouTube algorithm that would often push out slop or otherwise just garbage like, oh, text-to-speech video of top rifles for seniors for under $200 and it's from an AI that nobody wants, instead of actual good content. But please subscribe and share. It really means a lot. And if you'd like to support the channel a little bit more, I do have a subscribe star and a Ko-fi in the link below, in the video description below. But thank you very much for watching the spray painting a firearm the U.S. Army way with stencils, or Rhodesian Brushstroke pattern. Thank you very much for watching. Oh yeah, one more thing. Do your taxes. Like, I know it's cringe to, to pay for taxes, but you have to do so anyways. And the IRS will do a lot to you if you don't. I'm not from the IRS. I'd rather have this message come from me than them. And better do that quick before you have to pay any sort of penalties or any sorts of other problems. And it's a good idea to double check and verify with the tax code and tax professional. And even if you live outside the United States, as an American citizen, you still need to pay your taxes for both the country that you're living in and the United States. Isn't that fun? Speaking of taxes, I really like these sorts of AR-15 pistols just because I don't have to pay for unnecessary ones. Not a brace, not a rifle, no, not a stock, not a rifle. This is a pistol brace. So this is, under the eyes of the law, a pistol, which is pretty neat. But yeah, thanks for watching.